During the height of the pandemic, I Zoomed early morning yoga classes. My laptop screen was a scrim, a border, if you like, between two worlds. My world seemed private and inviolate, an extension of the dream state I'd just left. A few months back, as the instructor described how to arrange our limbs for the final spinal twist, he enjoined, "Don't worry about the pose's final destination," which my dream state mind heard as, "Don't worry about the poet's final destination." And instantly, a vivid Japanese watercolor of a landscape bloomed in my inner eye. Two ancient poets in dust-colored robes, staffs in hand, walked along a river valley, mountains rising on each side. They walked slowly, but with purpose, although stopping to admire a clutch of purple iris, the swallow's interlacing swoops, the gorgeously gnarled branches of a mulberry tree. The purling river ran beside them like a friendly beast, braiding and unbraiding over rocks and waterfalls. The poet's path led up and up toward sharp and snowy mountains, their topmost peaks yearning against the infinite sky, as if trying to pierce its blue membrane into whatever lay beyond. I thought of this image again when my mother died in April, for she was an ancient poet herself, and in her last year she did indeed walk with a staff, an old ski pole, stabbing dents in the soft pine floors of her home,
Oh,
impatient
wow.
with the strictures and burden of her failing body. She was impatient with much, imperious, strong-willed, ever curious, and still beautiful at 97. I'm glad she didn't die in a time of ice and unrelenting cold, but waited until the earth began to renew and refresh herself and us, when birds began returning to this northern dome of the globe. I'm glad she left this world as though forsythia and daffodils were giving way to lilacs, as the peonies pushed stalks and leaves up from the thawing earth, their nascent buds straining to crack open and burst into flower. My mother loved peonies, with their huge, beautifully colored blooms, their flagrant scent. She loved all flowers. She reveled in the pandemonium of spring. My mother's death seemed the obverse of spring. Her life force drew in, contracted, and then was simply no more. It was a sudden letting go, expected in the abstract, but nonetheless, a shock. For a small woman, she claimed an outsized place in all our hearts, and we are still bereft. I stayed up all night with her body, which changed from warm to cool, then marble cold. Her face became youthful and smooth. 97 years slipped backwards until her face was like a child's. I read my mother's poetry aloud to her throughout the night until the birds brought in the morning light.
Oh, beautiful.
Neckers, as they were called in centuries past. My mother would have known that word. She loved language, history, and so much else besides. Literature, geology, zoology, all animals, but especially cats, Flo blue china, Victorian wicker furniture, sculpting, Gilbert and Sullivan, Glenn Miller and Verdi, Navajo jewelry, this is one of hers, the Adirondacks, sweet liqueurs, arguments. I gave the knackers a favorite dress of my mother's, Art Deco swirls of stained glass colors to be her final raiment, another antique word. And then they eased her corpse into a white shroud, and I watched as her body and finally her face were zipped up, gone, and they carried her out of her home and away. Our paths diverged forever. I began the rest of my life, and my mother started her final journey past the border of her known, beloved world to whatever final destination lies beyond.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Very nice.
Beautiful.
Thank you.